Hello,
Yeah.
hello everyone. Welcome back to this brand new video. Today we'll debate Comrade Rhys on Post-Stalin USSR. Okay, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Comrade Rhys. I am a Marxist-Leninist YouTuber, and I have a YouTube channel where I cover topics ranging from history of former socialist countries to the basics of Marxist-Leninist theory, and also the current struggles working people face in my country of Britain.
Yeah, sure. Go check out his channel. He has some good videos about, for example, Fury and other things such as debunking anti-communist myths, such as the Black Book of Communism. Okay. We also have a moderator called Dimitri III. Do you want to say something about yourself?
I'm communist from Ukraine. My name is Miti.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, now, would you like to start, Comrade Rhys?
Okay, let's go ahead. So I uphold the position that the Khrushchevite revisionist leadership dragged the USSR, as well as the people's democracies of Eastern Europe, down the wrong track in the post-Stalin period. I think it's very important to understand the complete departure from Marxism-Leninism that was undertaken by the revisionists that not only really harmed the international communist movement, but also led to the demise of the USSR and its illegal dissolution in 1991 by Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin. There we are.
Thank you. Alright, thank you. I disagree with you. I'd say that post-Stalin USSR did not revise Marxism-Leninism and that it continued the Marxist-Leninist path that it always had from Lenin and Stalin onwards already. And I'd say that I believe that the successes of Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev did not lead to the demise of the USSR, and that the demise started after Brezhnev. Okay, anyway, okay, now I'll start talking about the first topic. So we'll talk about 5 topics. This Destalonization and secret speech are the first topic. Okay, let me start talking about it. Okay. Anyway, I believe that the secret speech and Destalonization were good, and that they did not denounce Stalin and did not even remove his personality cult. Sure, his personality cult was toned down, but it de facto existed until 1987. Khrushchev praised Stalin in the secret speech even. To quote him in the secret speech, it is known that after Lenin's death, especially during the first year, Stalin actively fought for Leninism against the enemies of Leninist fury and against those who debated. Beginning with Leninist fury, the party with its central committee at the head started on a great-scale work on the socialist industrialization of the country, on agricultural collectivization, and on cultural revolution. At that time, Stalin gained great popularity, sympathy, and support. The party had to fight those who tried to lead the country away from the correct Leninist path. It had to fight Trotskyites, Zinovievites, Invitists, and bourgeois nationalists. This fight was indispensable. He praised Stalin for collectivization, the construction of a socialist centralized planned economy, his ideological fight against Trotskyites, Zinovievites, Bukharinites, revisionists, and others, and as well as the great purges in his secret speech. Khrushchev also justified all Stalin's crimes, such as the deportations and his affair with Yezhov, by saying that those were just failed attempts of Stalin to protect the USSR, socialism, and working class interests in the secret speech. To quote him in the secret speech, "Comrades, so as not to repeat errors of the past, the Central Committee has declared itself resolute against the cult of the individual. We consider that Stalin was extolled to excess. However, in the past, Stalin undoubtedly performed great services to the party, to the working class, and to the international workers' movement. This question is complicated by the fact that all this which we have just discussed was done during Stalin's life under his leadership and with his concurrence. Here, Stalin was convinced that this was necessary for the defense of the interests of the working classes against the against the plotting of enemies and against the attack of the imperial camp. He saw this from the position of the interest of the working class, of the interest of the labor and people, of the interest of the whole, of the victory of socialism and communism. We cannot say that these were the deeds of a giddy despot. He considered that this should be done in the interest of the party, of the working masses, in the name of the defense of the revolution's gains. In this lies the whole tragedy." End quote. Furthermore, Khrushchev said on page 301 of William Todman's book, Nikita Khrushchev, the man in his era, that you can't be a Marxist without being a Stalinist, essentially calling everyone a revisionist who does not like Stalin. This happened in late 1956. So after the secret speech, to quote the book, 3 years later, 3 weeks later, before 800 guests at the Chinese embassy reception, he declared that being a communist was inseparable from being a Stalinist, so that even though mistakes had been made in the struggle against the enemies of Marxism-Leninism, may God grant that every communist will be able to fight for the interests of the working class as Stalin fought. Communism's enemies had tried to exploit his criticism of Stalin's shortcomings to undermine the Soviet regime, but nothing will come out of this gentleman, any more than you will be able to see your ears with that mirror. Okay, anyway. Um, Wait 1 second. By the way, is the thing recording for Burned? Just curious, is it recording? Alright.
I don't know.
Okay. Now, Comrade Rhys, you can now reply.
Okay, there we are. So, I'll first like to start off by saying that what happened in the Soviet Union was great, especially during the Stalin era when the country was going from strength to strength. The USSR had transformed itself from a semi-feudal backwater into a modern superpower within the period of a few decades, and their socialist planning had enabled them to do this without the use of any kind of slavery or colonial pillage. It had become a socialist country where the people had access to a higher level of culture and scientific attainment. It had also become the leader of the proletariat everywhere, and also made the single most important contribution to the defeat of Nazi Germany too. Stalin's contributions to Marxist theory were also immense, and so were his contributions to the building of the international communist movement, because the mere mention of his name still sends shivers down the spines of the bourgeoisie everywhere. Now, these phenomenal achievements, however, were all discredited by the Khrushchevite revisionists. It all began from the 20th Party Congress of 1956, when Khrushchev led a full-scale attack on Stalin. This led to the breakup of the relatively united working-class movement with things like the Sino-Soviet split, as well as the Soviet splits with Albania and Romania too. The attacks against Stalin by the Khrushchevites had also led to the many communists all over the world outside of the socialist camp actually quitting their parties and defecting over to the Trotskyist side. You know, the same Trotskyists who conspired against the Soviet Union and collaborated with the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Khrushchev also sponsored many books and articles that lied about Stalin, as well as Lavrenti Beria, who Khrushchev had organized the murder of, by the way. Khrushchev's deliberate lies about Stalin and of the history of the USSR under his leadership went on to influence anti-communist authors in the likes of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Roy Medvedev, and even Robert Conquest. To this day, works like these are considered to be like the holy Bibles within the reactionary anti-communist circles. Now, when Khrushchev brought up the cult of personality under Stalin and then called him a dictator, there was no evidence to back this up at all. It's evident that the reason why Stalin had statues of him erected and posters of him drawn and made was not because he made it the new law of the land. It's because the people of the Soviet Union actually loved him. Like, not only did Stalin himself oppose the cult of personality that was built around him, but he also tried on several separate occasions to resign from his position, which the Central Committee had actually rejected because they wanted him to remain as the leader of the USSR. Even these days in like former Soviet republics like Georgia and Belarus, Stalin's approval rate has shot through the roof. And even in present-day Russia, Stalin is far more popular than Putin. Even among reactionary nationalist groups in Russia, Stalin is seen as a hero. It's also worth noting that although Khrushchev deliberately lied about Stalin and the history of the USSR under Stalin, very few people actually knew that he was lying. And this was primarily due to the fact that Khrushchev had published no evidence whatsoever for his claims, and not even party historians were allowed to see documents either. Under Brezhnev, as well as his successors, Andropov and Janenko, anti-Stalin works and books were almost entirely eliminated. I will give it to the other Soviet leaders who succeeded Khrushchev. They could see the great harm that he had done to the world communist movement. Unfortunately, though they actually had the evidence to to prove that Khrushchev had indeed lied, evidence which we have nowadays, they made the avoidable mistake of refusing to reject these lies about Stalin. And now the big question is, why did the Khrushchevites do this? The truth is that they were basically nationalists. They wanted the Soviet Union that was powerful economically, militarily, and politically, but they did not want to move the USSR in the direction of a more egalitarian, truly communist society. Stalin, on the other hand, did want to move towards communism. Moving towards the next stage from socialism to communism was the theme of the 19th Party Congress in 1952. This was the only party congress in the history of the country whose transcript was never published. And that's me.
Okay.
That's the
Okay, thank you. I'll reply to that right away. You said that Khrushchev completely discredited Stalin and completely denounced him. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I've got plenty of evidence. Have you?
Well, I told you already in my first statement about de-Stalinization that he actually said that you cannot be a Marxist without being a Stalinist. So as we can see, he did not denounce Stalin, and he also praised Stalin for things like collectivization and the construction of a centralized planned socialist economy, the ideological struggle of the 1920s and the Great Purges. He praised Stalin for all these things and more things, such as Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Winter War, and other things. We cannot say that Khrushchev discredited or denounced Stalin, and also the secret speech did not cause the splits that happened in this international working class movement. In fact, Mao and Hoxha supported the secret speech. They did not oppose it. Well, in Hoxha's case, it's a bit more complicated. In public, he supported the secret speech, but in private, he opposed it. Whereas Mao supported it both in private and in public. Let me actually quote Mao. Stalin took more and more pleasure in the cult of the individual and violated the party system of democratic centralism and the principle of combining collective leadership with individual responsibility. As a result, he made some serious mistakes. For example, he broadened the scope of the suppression of counter-revolution. He lacked the necessary vigilance on the eve of the anti-fascist war. He failed to pay proper attention to the further development of agriculture and the material welfare of peasantry. He gave certain wrong advice on the international communist movement, and in particular made the wrong decision on the question of Yugoslavia. On these issues, Stalin fell full victim to subjectivism and one-sidedness, and divorced himself from objective reality and from the masses. The cult of the individual is a rotten carryover from the long history of mankind. The cult of the individual is rooted not only in the exploiting classes, but also in the small producers, as well as is well known. Patriarchism is a product of small producer economy. This is a quote by Mao from Stalin's place in history. Mao supported the secret speech. Okay, the split happened for other reasons. Okay, anyway, you also said that Khrushchev may influence people like Robert Conquest. Well, he isn't responsible for what they wrote.
I never said he was responsible, no. I said he influenced these writers. He never wrote the books himself.
He did not want to do that. I mean, he did not want to, publish the secret speech on purpose. It was secret for a reason, because
he was an opportunist.
How he did not want to, publish the speech?
Khrushchev was an opportunist. There's no denying that.
Well, I mean, how is this relevant? We're talking about how
we are literally talking about Khrushchevite revisionism.
Yeah, but how is this, important when talking about how he influenced Robert Conquest? He did not want to publish the secret speech. The secret speech got in the hands of the West through a Mossad agent. I can give you the name of the Mossad agent if you want. One second.
Go ahead.
All right, 1 second. It'll take a while. Wait. Give me like 30 seconds.
Well, gentlemen, I guess we need to.
Okay. Here, his name is Viktor Grayevsky. This is the Mossad agent that got hands in the secret speech. He published the secret speech in the West.
Still
Here, I
doesn't
even
change.
what?
Still doesn't change the fact that Khrushchev was an opportunist and a revisionist who discredited the Stalin leadership in the secret speech.
How did he do? Okay, I'm telling you this again. He literally praised collectivization and other things that Stalin did. How did he discredit Stalin?
Khrushchev never criticized Stalin publicly, only behind his back. He was an opportunist.
Dude, okay. In the secret speech, he also supported Stalin. He literally praised the construction of the social centralized fund economy and other things that Stalin did. So how can you say that he denounced Stalin even privately?
And then how do you explain the market reforms then? How do you explain Soviet Union becoming revisionist?
Well,
that happened.
Well, we'll. This is getting off topic. We'll talk about that later, a bit later. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, there was also you also mentioned that wait 1 second that the Khrushchev financed books and articles that are anti-communist. Anti-communist. Can you give an example? Because I've never heard of this claim.
Can you say that again, please?
You said that Khrushchev financed books and articles that are anti-communist.
Yeah, examples of books. There's Gulag Archipelago. There's the Red Terror by...
He did not publish those books. He even prevented them from being published.
No, Khrushchev himself didn't publish them, I know. Solzhenitsyn wrote the books.
Yeah, but you said they were financed by him.
Yeah, and critics of the Soviet Union who actually exploited this secret speech.
Okay, what's your source for that?
I'll publish them now inside the chat. I can't publish them now because I've got them.
Because this is impossible, because he literally prevented the Gulag Archipelago from being published.
Message is too long.
Also,
to agree to disagree at some moments. I believe the positions are clear. Comrade Rhys, have you some questions to Comrade King?
Questions to Comrade King, even?
Yeah, and also, I did not finish some of my points. Stalin did violate collective leadership, so that's true, and he supported his own personality cult. In 1951, he signed a decree to build statues after himself, and he praised himself in his own literature, in the edited biography of him. How is this not a personality cult? He literally praised his own personality cult. Khrushchev and Brezhnev did say that he opposed his personality cult back in the 1920s and early 1930s, but after like 1935, he was supporting his own personality cult.
The people of the Soviet Union actually loved Stalin. There was
I know that. Well, yeah, I know, but you say the problem is that Stalin supported it.
No, he opposed it. He opposed the cult of personality.
Why did he praise himself in his own literature then?
Because leaders are reserved, they're reversed. Because when leaders get popular, it's normal to expect the cult of personality, like statues and everything.
So but how is it justifiable for a leader himself to support his own personality cult? And in fact, Marx and Engels and Lenin opposed praising leaders. Lenin said that you shouldn't prohibit it. However, the leaders themselves should not do that. Let me actually quote Marx and Lenin. 1 second. Give me a little second. Okay, this is a letter by Marx to William Bloss from November 10th, 1877. Neither of all scarce a straw for popularity. Let me cite one proof of this. Such was my evasion of the personality code that at the time of the International, when plagued by numerous moves originating from various countries to accord me public honor, I never allowed one of these to enter the domain of publicity, nor did I ever reply to them, save with an occasional snub. When Engels and I first joined the secret communist society, we did so only on the condition that anything conducive to a superstitious belief in authority be eliminated from the rules. And as for Lenin, Lenin called it unpleasant, called personality cults unpleasant and harmful. To quote a Soviet biography of Lenin from 1983, page 365. In September 1918, Lenin summoned a few leading comrades and told them roughly the following: "I note with deep dissatisfaction that my person is being glorified. This is annoying and harmful. All of us know that personalities have nothing to do with it. It will be awkward for myself to prohibit that sort of thing. There would also be something ridiculous and pretentious about it. It is up to you to put the brakes on unobtrusively." Or this other fact: in 1920, the commission collecting material on the history of the RCPV and the October Revolution decided to begin collecting exhibits for a Lenin museum. Lenin categorically forbade this and told Olminsky, who had reported the decision to him, "You can't imagine how unpleasant I find the constant promotion of my personality." As we can see, Marx and Engels and Lenin all opposed the praisal of leaders. They believe that it's okay if the nation itself doesn't, but they believe that the state shouldn't do it. And also, I'd like to mention that Stalin's personality code technically did not end until 1987. He was still praised for things such as collectivization and socialist centralized planned economy until 1987. His personality code was only toned down. It was not completely removed. Also, I'd like to mention that Khrushchev did not lie. You have to explain it to me how he did lie. And also, post-Stalin USSR did try to make the USSR more communist and more egalitarian. In fact, in 1956, okay, this is economics, but we'll get to that later. Okay.
Okay, we'll get to
Okay.
that.
Anyway, okay. Do you want to reply now to anything?
Let's see. Stalin's personality cult, he literally did oppose it. There's some very good books by Grover Furr and Hopal Bar about this as well.
Again, I told you he opposed it in the 1920s and early 1930s. However, from like 1935 onwards, he supported his own personality cult. Why did he sign decrees to build statues of himself? Why did he praise himself in 1948? Why did he do that? How is this not a personality cult? How is he not supporting it?
Yeah, it is a personality cult.
Yeah, but how is he not supporting it? Yeah, but how?
When the people love their leader, when the people love
yeah,
their
again, but
leader,
how is he not supporting it? He literally praised himself. What is it?
Here, Comrade Rhys, even if you convince him completely, he can't say about it.
Can you say that again? Because I couldn't understand you.
Comrade Rhys, continue, please.
Repeat me, is it? Sorry, I can't understand what you're saying. I'm very sorry. Let's see. Yeah, when leaders are very popular, it's kind of natural to expect a cult of personality. That's literally what I'm saying to you. And in the end, it turned out to the point that Stalin had to accept the cult of personality. Like, he opposed it.
So by accept you mean he supported it later, or what?
Kind of had to, really. If the people loved him that much, that they were building statues of him, then it's what else do you expect?
Don't you believe that it's anti-Marxist because Marx, Engels, and Lenin opposed the state supporting personality cults?
The difference with a cult of personality in a socialist society, it's literally a reflection of how the people actually love their leader. And it's not a reflection of like a separate culture that's totally detached from the people. like we see in capitalist countries.
Actually, this doesn't matter because Lenin, Marx, and Engels. Lenin even opposed his own personality cult. He did not support how people were glorifying him. He did allow it, but he did not want the state to do it. So even in socialist and countries and dictatorship of proletariats, you cannot allow personality cults to be strengthened, let alone the state support it.
No, I agree with you that cult of personality is harmful, like in itself.
But well, okay, then why do you think that it's acceptable if the state supports personality cults after a while? Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah,
what kind of lies does Khrushchev have? Can you reply to that as well?
yeah. First one was obviously the cult of personality, which we've just been talking about, and the dictator one is also a lie.
Don't you agree that
And
he? Okay, move on.
the other one then was leading down the path away from Marxism-Leninism from the 50s onwards. You
All
literally
right, thank
can't
you.
deny that. If all of your sources are coming from Wikipedia, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to trust you.
All right, thank you. Um, okay. Don't you agree that Stalin violated collective leadership in the later years of his rule?
Towards the end of his leadership, yeah, I think there were mistakes made.
Yeah, but when he said that Stalin was a dictator, he meant that he was violating collective leadership at the end of his rule. Those are mistakes made, but those are just minor oopsies that Stalin had. Okay, anyway, let's move on to the next topic now. What was the next one? I forgot. I think it's peaceful coexistence. Yeah, peaceful coexistence.
I think
Okay,
so.
you start this time.
Okay, the theories of the proletarian revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat are at the very center of Marxism-Leninism. The questions of whether revolution should be upheld or opposed, and whether the dictatorship of the proletariat should be upheld or opposed, have always been the focus of struggle between Marxism-Leninism and revisionism. At the 22nd Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Khrushchevite revisionism had developed into a complete system, and the anti-revolutionary theories of peaceful coexistence were being implemented. Underneath this rhetoric of peaceful coexistence, Khrushchev was essentially secretly simping for the US imperialists. That's the best way I can explain it. Like the whole idea of peaceful coexistence, meaning that the socialist camp could somehow peacefully coexist with the capitalist camp, is quite frankly ridiculous, to say the least. Not only does it ignore the very antagonistic contradiction between capitalism and socialism, which can only be solved through revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat, but it also ignored the antagonistic contradiction between imperialism and anti-imperialism, one which can only be solved through the anti-imperialist forces actually fighting the imperialists and kicking them out. When the Cold War was escalating after World War II, the imperialists were immediately entering the nuclear age. They had dropped 2 atomic bombs onto Japan, and they formed NATO in 1949 to deliberately threaten the socialist camp and push them to war. So the Soviet allied countries did the right thing by forming the Warsaw Pact as a collective defense treaty between the socialist countries and against the imperialists. East Germany also did the right thing by building the Berlin Wall around West Berlin in 1961 to keep capitalism out of the Eastern Bloc and then to defend the socialist camp from the imperialist aggressors in the West. The only ones who were really benefiting from this idea of peaceful coexistence were the imperialists. Like the imperialist countries were once terrified of the Soviet Union because it was a real challenge to their ability to dominate the world. The Soviet Union was also the reason why Western European social democracy even became a thing to begin with, as a tool in the hands of the ruling class to pacify workers and squash their revolutionary potential. So for the Khrushchevites to then come out with their peaceful coexistence idea, that was just wrecking the socialist camp and the international communist movement in general, because not only did it oppose the revolutionary struggles of the oppressed peoples and nations who were victims of imperialism, but it also betrayed proletarian internationalism, and it was also a kick in the teeth for anti-imperialist forces all over the world who actually looked to the Soviet Union as their strongest ally against the imperialists. That's my take on it.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'd like to say that peaceful coexistence was actually Stalin's idea. In volume 16 of his works, Stalin said the following: peaceful coexistence of capitalism and communism is possible with mutual willingness to cooperate, ready to fulfill its obligations, with respect for the principle of equality and non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. And also, some of the things you mentioned are peaceful transition to socialism. That's not peaceful coexistence. We'll discuss that in the third topic. Yeah, anyway, I'd also like to say that external antagonism was not denied by Post-Stalin USSR. Let me quote Khrushchev. 1 second. In advocating peaceful coexistence, we of course have no intention of saying that there are no contradictions between socialism and capitalism, that complete harmony can be established between them, or that it is possible to reconcile the communist and bourgeois ideologies. Such a viewpoint will be tantamount to retreating from Marxism-Leninism. The ideological differences are irreconcilable and will continue so. This is page 74 of Peace and no. War Without Conquest. That's Khrushchev's book. Anyway, now, would you like to reply?
Let's see.
Just so you know, you can make notes and stuff. I think it will be easier if you would make notes.
Yeah, I've got some notes here. I have.
Alright.
Yeah, there we are. I can understand not like interfering in other countries' internal affairs. That's kind of like
that's
mutual
what
aid and
peaceful
stuff.
coexistence is. That's what peaceful coexistence is. And I told you, post-Stalin USSR did not deny, they did not deny, what is it called, external antagonism. They said that the denying external antagonism would be rejecting Marxism-Leninism.
Which is kind of what they were doing anyway. The Khrushchevite revisionists.
No, that's what Khrushchev said. He said that it's anti-Marxist to reject external antagonism. How did he reject external antagonism? Did you see how many revolutions he founded? Like how many revolutions supported? A great example of that is, helping Cuba. You're full of shit right now. Also, I think you're talking about cooperating with America. Actually, that was already Stalin's idea. I can quote Stalin if you want on this. He said that. All right, 1 sec. Holy fuck! Do you know how many sources I saved? This is so much. I can barely find them. All right. I think I found it. 1 sec. All right, there you go. I found it. The US and USSR systems are different, but we didn't wage war against each other, and the USSR does not propose to. If during the war they could cooperate, why can't they today in peace cooperate, given the wish to cooperate? Joseph Stalin, the interview with Harold Stassen, April 9th, 1947. This is, if I'm not mistaken, the 12th volume of his works. If not the 12th, then 13th. He also said that in the same interview, if I'm not mistaken, on April 9th, 1947, that the two countries should trade. He said, the interviewer asked, "Do you look forward in the future to a greater exchange of ideas and news of students and teachers, of artists, of tourists, if there is cooperation?" And Stone replied with, "This will happen inevitably if cooperation is established, for an exchange of goods will lead to an exchange of people." There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to replace it to that? Because this is not revisionism.
Have you got a source for it that you can post in the
Yeah, I have.
chat?
One sec. They want
Post
my
in the
sources
chat.
They want all my sources on peaceful coexistence in general. That I just
Yeah,
cited.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Keirstone supported trading with America and investments and stuff like that. In this PDF, it's a compilation of his writings on peaceful coexistence after World War II. One sec. I'll also show in a second the external antagonism quote that I showed before. Alright, it's from here. Page 74, I think.
Page 74.
Yeah. If you want, I can also quote Khrushchev on something else. He said that if the US and other imperialist countries interfere in revolutions, then the USSR will have to do the same. So if the imperialists violate peaceful coexistence, like non-interference in each other's internal affairs, then the USSR will do the same. I think that this is pretty Marxist and pretty fair. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to reply to that or something, or should we move on to the next topic?
I still hold that position that the imperialists would only always violate it anyway. Because
Well, yeah. Again, in that case, the USSR, post-Stalin USSR, would interfere in other revolutions to help revolutionaries fight, the imperialists. So if they violate non-interference in each other's internal affairs, then the USSR will do the same, even after 1956 and after 1962.
that's only because the Chinese were doing it as well. Like, they forced the Khrushchevites to help.
No, the Chinese didn't do it after 1963, yet the Soviets still did it from start to finish, at least until 1985.
Yeah, their foreign policy, but they still sided with anti-colonial movements and everything.
Who? The Chinese?
And the Soviets as well.
Give an example of the Chinese doing that after 1963. They stopped doing that after that.
Vietnam?
Vietnam? After 1963?
Yeah, in the 70s as well. They helped the Viet Cong out, fighting the US imperialists. And then obviously, towards the 80s, they became very revisionist, the Chinese did.
Do you have a source for that? I only know that they helped Cambodia in the 70s. That's the only Marxist thing that they did after like 1963.
Yeah, Cambodia, Vietnam.
Well, that's about it, I think. Yeah, that's about it. They didn't help anyone else after 1963. Yet the Soviets always helped everyone. All revolutionaries. Okay, anyway, shall we move on to the next topic?
You can do if you want, yeah. Yeah. Who wants to start?
Started,
if you start,
last
because you went, yeah.
Wait, I think you should start now, I believe. If I'm, oh, no, wait.
Are you sure? Because
Yeah,
you
I
went
should
first
start.
last time.
Wait,
Yeah.
one sec. Okay, can you start, because I'm a bit busy right now. One sec.
Yeah. Aye. Yeah. Okay, so peaceful transition. So the Khrushchevites, they propagated the erroneous proposition of the peaceful parliamentary road to socialism, instead of recognizing the necessity of the working class smashing the bourgeois state, meaning through the revolutionary violence of the oppressed class against its oppressors. While a peaceful revolution is unlikely to happen, as history has evidently shown us, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. Like, realistically, a revolution where the working people oust the capitalists with relatively little bloodshed can only ever happen if the bourgeoisie is weak enough and if the proletariat is strong enough. Like I have a quote by Stalin, which he said during a conversation between himself and H.G. Wells. Quote, "You are wrong if you think that the communists are enamored with violence. They would be very pleased to drop violent methods if the ruling class give way to the working class. But the experience of history speaks against such an assumption." Close quote. He said that in a conversation with H.G. Wells. And what Stalin is saying here is that while a revolutionary process doesn't have to be full of carnage, you can't just be a pacifist while doing this, and you can't just go down the parliamentary road. That won't really get you anywhere, and it'll only lead to your downfall. Like, take the fact that many socialist revolutions ended up leading to civil wars. That was all down to class struggle, as opposed to the revisionist idea of class collaborationism. There we are. Can you hear me?
All right, are you done?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, let me reply to all of that. Actually, this is already a bit part of State of the Whole People, but I don't care. We'll talk about that later as well.
Yeah,
One sec.
that's it.
Okay, there we go. There we go. Actually, Khrushchev and Brezhnev agree with the quote that you showed by Stalin. One second. They believed that peaceful revolution is a method that can be used to transition to socialism. Oh my God! Once. Okay, okay. Khrushchev and Brezhnev believed that peaceful revolution is a means to transition to socialism. However, revolution should always be the way that a transition to socialism happens. They rejected reformism, okay, and they believed that if the bourgeoisie resist a peaceful revolution, then then a violent revolution becomes inevitable. I actually didn't think that you would agree with this. One second. Let me quote Khrushchev on this. One second. Our enemies like to depict us Leninists as advocates of violence always and everywhere. True, we recognize the need for the revolutionary transformation of capitalist society into socialist society. It is that distinguishes the revolutionary Marxists from the reformists and the opportunists. There is no doubt that in a number of capitalist countries, the violent overthrow of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie and the sharp aggravation of class struggle connected with this are inevitable. But the forms of social revolution vary. It is not true that we regard violence and civil war as the only way to remake society. It will be recalled that in the conditions that arose in April 1917, Lenin granted the possibility that the Russian Revolution might develop peacefully. Leninism teaches us that the ruling classes will not surrender their power voluntarily, and the greater or lesser degree of intensity which the struggle may assume, the use or the non-use of violence in the transition to socialism depends on the resistance of the exploiters, on whether the exploiting class itself resorts to violence rather than on the proletariat. In this connection, the question arises of whether it is possible to go over to socialism by using parliamentary means. No such course was open to the Russian Bolsheviks. Since then, however, the historical situation has undergone radical changes which make possible a new approach to the question. The forces of socialism and democracy have grown immeasurably throughout the world, and capitalism has become much weaker. In these circumstances, the working class, by relying around itself, the working peasantry, the intelligentsia, all patriotic forces, and resolutely repulsing the opportunist elements who are incapable of giving up the policy of compromise with the capitalists and landlords, is in the position to defeat the reactionary forces opposed to the interests of the people, to capture a stable majority in parliament, and transform the latter from an organ of bourgeois democracy into a genuine instrument of the people's will. In the countries where capitalism is still strong and has a huge military and police apparatus at its disposal, the reactionary forces will, of course, inevitably offer serious resistance. The transition to socialism will be attended by a sharp class revolutionary struggle, whatever the form of transition to socialism, the decisive and indispensable factor is the political leadership of the working class headed by its vanguard. Without this, there can be no transition to socialism. This is from the 20th Congress of the CPCO. All right, you can read it yourself. I'll link it. So he believed that revolution is the only way, and that class struggle intensifies when you transition to socialism.
Yes,
This
it
is pretty
does.
Marxist. Yeah, this is what Khrushchev also said. This is what the position of post-Stalin USSR also was.
That's what the Stalin leadership was doing as well. They were working towards communism.
Yeah, yeah. So this is not revisionism. To
No, the Khrushchev leadership was not working towards communism. They were restoring capitalism very slowly with erroneous market reforms.
okay, but you do agree that peaceful revolution is possible, and that
It's
post-Stalin
possible, but
USSR.
not likely.
Well, well, if the bourgeoisie resist, as Khrushchev
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
then
If
a violent revolution is inevitable.
a
Okay?
violent revolution is probably the most likely one, because obviously the bourgeoisie is not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, in most cases, yeah. But you gotta admit, half of the world was socialist in like the 1950s, and Stalin
Yeah, it
also
was.
recognized that. Yeah, and Stalin also recognized the possibility of a peaceful revolution as long as the bourgeoisie don't resist. Anyway, we
Yeah,
are.
if they weaken us.
Do you think that we are done with this, like with this topic?
Yeah, we can move on if you want.
Okay. The next topic is state of the whole people. All right. State of the whole people. Okay. Do you want to do that first or economics? I think economics will be more efficient as state of the whole people is very closely connected to economics. Okay. Can you start? Okay, I'll start since you started last
Yeah,
time.
you start. Yeah.
Okay. State of the whole people is is actually Stalin's idea. It's not Khrushchev's idea. State of the whole people basically means that internal antagonism is abolished in the Soviet Union. Okay.
Is
Okay.
that
And
all you got to say? Is that all you got to
what?
say? Is that all you've got to say?
Well, for now, I guess sure. I won't try to make it long since I have no arguments to argue against right now.
Right. Yeah, by the 1960s, like revisionism became more visible. Like not as visible as it was in the 80s, but as visible, like more visible in the 60s. It's because it was able to secure the adoption and incorporation of this erroneous proposition in a new program in the 22nd Party Congress of where the actual party came to the pretty ridiculous position that the dictatorship of the proletariat, meaning the dictatorship of the working people of the bourgeoisie, was not needed anymore in the USSR, and that it had been replaced by the so-called state of the whole people. Like this, again, this is obviously an absurd position that the revisionists were really pushing down. And if you're a Marxist anyway, then I don't need to explain to you that the state only exists to serve as an instrument in the hands of one class to oppress and repress another class.
All right, are you done?
Yeah, yeah, for now.
Okay. Anyway, I'd like to say that Khrushchev and Brezhnev did not deny the dictatorship of the proletariat. They believed that that the dictatorship of the proletariat is in fact necessary for as long as class antagonism exists. Let me actually quote them. 1 second. Okay, where's this quote? Okay, there we go. The dictatorship of the proletariat, born in the Socialist Revolution, played a word historical role, ensuring the victory of socialism in the USSR. At the same time, in the process of building socialism, it itself has undergone changes. In connection with the liquidation of the exploiting classes, the function of suppressing their resistance has died out. This is Khrushchev in the 22nd Congress of the CPSU. And also, there was no dictatorship of the proletariat already in 1936. Stalin himself admitted this. Let me quote a book by Eric von Rhys called Political Thought of Joseph Stalin. Okay, one sec. From a practical point of view, the 1936 Constitution's failure to claim an exclusively proletarian character reflected the new reality of the introduction of general and equal suffrage, which brought positive discrimination in favor of the urban working class to an end. The proletarian dictatorship, for what it had been with, was in practice thereby abolished. According to Molotov, Stalin admitted privately that the proletarian dictatorship was a thing of the past. In his speech of the 1st of October 1938, the latter observed that in its first class stage, the proletarian state served to oppress the bourgeoisie. Soviet power was now in a second stage. When power becomes the power of the toilers, I would not say that it is now a class power, that it is the power of one class. Okay, anyway, this is what Stone said. He said in 1938 that the dictatorship of the proletariat was abolished in 1936, and this actually makes sense. If you abolish the bourgeoisie, the class antagonism, and kulaks, and all their elements, then there is no bourgeoisie to oppress anymore. And also, the proletariat are wage workers, so that means that they are exploited, whereas under socialism they are not. So from a logical point of view alone, there was no dictatorship of the proletariat from 1936 onwards. And also, I'd like to mention that the state of the whole people is just believing that class antagonism has been abolished in 1936. One second, I'll quote Khrushchev once. The power of our society and state in connection with the growth of the dictatorship of the proletariat into a nation state isn't only weakening, but on the contrary, it rapidly increases, because to the old sources of our power are added new sources. Alongside with the constant increase of economic potential, the social base of our state has grown stronger and expanded. Society has become one and monophilic, like it has never been before, and interest is the main source of the power of the state. Every worker, every peasant, every intelligentsia can say, "We're the state. It's politics. It's our politics." The task to develop and strengthen the state, the task to protect it from all kinds of encroachments, this is our common task. But why is the state actually kept, although the main thing that gave birth to it, which is class antagonism, is gone? The reason is that it has not yet exhausted the tasks that society can only solve with the help of the state. These tasks and the functions of our social state are clearly defined in the draft program of our party. Also, I have a question to you. Um, One sec. Do you believe that there was no bourgeoisie anymore from 1936 onwards?
There was a bourgeoisie in the Soviet
Even
Union.
after 1936?
Yeah, there were still classes in the Soviet Union, man. That's why they
Well,
had the dictatorship of the proletariat.
no.
You're not
So
making any sense.
okay,
You're
even
not
under
making any
Stalin,
sense at all.
even under Stalin after
You're just
1936.
peddling non sequiturs.
Okay, let me actually quote Stalin, because he believed that class antagonism was abolished back in um, back in 1936. One second. Okay, I found it. This is a quote by Stalin from 1936. Unlike bourgeois constitutions, the draft of the new constitution of the USSR proceeds from the fact that there are no longer any antagonistic classes in society. That society consists of two friendly classes, of workers and peasants. That it is these classes, the laboring classes, that are in power. That the guidance of society by the state is in the hands of the working class, the most advanced class in society. That the constitution is needed for the purpose of consolidating a social order desired by and beneficial to the working people. This is I sent you a link. Stalin there said that there is no class antagonism anymore, no bourgeois class and no kulaks after 1936. So he basically said that state of the whole people started in 1936. It's Stalin's idea, dude.
These classes were being repressed in the Stalin leadership. They were still there.
No, he said that there were no
They weren't
classes like
actually
that
in
anymore.
power. They weren't in power. They were still there. They weren't in power.
They weren't there. Just read the thing I just sent.
I have. They weren't in power, but they were still there. They were being repressed by the dictatorship of the proletariat.
How can there be a bourgeois class when all means of production are
That's
socialized.
literally why. That's why you need the dictatorship of the proletariat to actually suppress the bourgeois class that's still there. You know, if you're a Marxist, I don't have to explain that to you.
Well, the bourgeois class was already gone by 1936, as
It was
Stalin
being
said.
repressed. It was being repressed.
Okay, why did Stalin say that there are no bourgeoisie anymore in 1936?
They weren't in power. That's what he meant by it. They weren't in power. The workers were in power. By the 1930s, the Soviet Union became a socialist
Okay,
country.
okay,
By the
okay.
1930s,
Listen, he
you're full of shit. I'm sorry.
dude, uh, he literally said, but in the USSR, there are no longer such classes as the capitalists, the landlords, the kulaks, etc. In the USSR, there are only
Yeah, the
two
workers
classes.
were in power, but they still needed the dictatorship of the proletariat.
Did you come to this conclusion? He doesn't talk about state power. He's talking about existing classes.
Yeah, which is why the state exists, because of existing classes.
Actually, it existed from 1936 onwards because of external antagonism. They had to like
Yeah,
suppress.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they
Oh,
couldn't just
okay. You
they
mean
couldn't just abolish the dictatorship of the proletariat spot right on the
okay?
spot.
So you mean that okay? Do you agree that internal class struggle was abolished? However,
No,
external class struggle.
both are still there. That's literally why the Soviet state existed, as a way to actually keep the workers in power. That's the only reason why the Soviet state was there.
Oh my god, dude, he lit. How? Okay, prove to me that he meant the state here.
You can see it in the quote. He's talking about
Okay,
the
sure.
classes such as capitalists, landlords, kulaks. They're still there, but they're not in power. That's literally what he's saying. The workers are in power, which is good. The workers are in power, so the dictatorship of the proletariat needs to be in place to actually suppress these classes that are trying to overthrow the dictatorship of the proletariat.
Why is he saying then that there are only two classes?
No, no, no. You know these classes that you've listed in the quote? He's listed in the quote. The capitalists, the landlords, the kulaks, the reactionaries, basically. They were still
You said that
present,
they
but
don't
they weren't.
exist. Yes.
They're not in power. They were still in the Soviet Union. They just weren't in power. That's why they still had the dictatorship of the proletariat. And that was abandoned by the revisionists with this state of the whole people nonsense. It was with the revisionists in power, the Soviet state became, rather than a state for the workers, the state for the entire Soviet people. And everything they said about working towards communism was just rhetoric in the Khrushchevite era.
Did you know? Okay, I know a better way to solve this. Did you know that there were already named proposals similar to the state of the whole similar to the state of the whole people under Stalin because there was no class antagonism anymore? Do you want me to list some?
Towards the 1950s.
No, named proposals already existed in 1936. Here, Stalin himself said it. Some proposed
Yeah,
that
the
we
Stalin
substitute.
leadership was working towards communism. The Stalin leadership was actually working on the right path. The
I don't
Khrushchev
see how
leadership
that's
wasn't.
I don't see how it's relevant. Here, he talks about name proposals. Those were created because there was no class antagonism anymore. Khrushchev just gave the new Soviet state a name that existed from 1936 onwards.
And then implemented all those market reforms. Yeah,
Okay, do you
brilliant.
want to go? Do you want to go?
Yeah,
You know,
let's
do you?
let's go. Let's go.
Okay, okay. Do you want to start since I started last time?
Yeah, okay.
We're now about economics. Okay.
I'll start. We got till 2:30, haven't we? So yeah, let's go. Alongside the political and ideological distortions that the Khrushchevites had implemented, the revisionists had also put forward economic reforms. These reforms obviously led to the most destructive consequences. The profit motive became the way of doing production under these reforms. As a result, these reforms eventually led to the growth of the private enterprise, the private economy, which was also known as the second economy. And the strata who benefited from this growth were obviously the emerging bourgeoisie. Under Stalin's leadership, the private economy was pretty heavily restricted, but under Khrushchev it emerged with a vengeance. It also grew even more during Brezhnev's leadership, and then it dominated the Soviet economy under Gorbachev. This resulted in the rise of underground capitalists who made large-scale capital investments, who organized production on a pretty big scale, who hired and exploited workers, who disposed of their commodities on the black market. Private factories began to spread across the country, and these manufacturers ranged from owners of a single workshop to multi-million ruble family clans who owned dozens of factories. It was these reforms, these market-orientated reforms, as well as the distortion of Marxism-Leninism by the Khrushchevites, as well as the material and ideological support that they received from the imperialist camp when they led their attacks on Stalin. I'm not refraining from that position, because that actually happened. These reactionary groups, who grew as a result of the private economy, though they were a lot more out in the open by the mid-1980s, they were promoting bourgeois individualism and greed. They were spewing out absolute rubbish against everything socialist. They carried on with the campaign in favor of private property, free enterprise, free markets, and such like bourgeois freedoms. That's my point there.
All right. Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to know what economic reform restored capitalism. Can you tell me the name of it, what it's called?
The biggest one was in the 80s, Perestroika and Glasnost. The biggest one.
Okay, but I don't support Gorbachev's USSR.
Yeah, that is Gorbachev. And in the 30 years following the accession of Khrushchev to the position of General Secretary, the private economy grew. It didn't decrease. Like reliable expert evidence has shown. Have a read of the book. Let me talk, right? Shut up for a minute. Okay. Reliable expert evidence has shown that while the national income and the value of retail goods and services in the Soviet Union as a whole increased 4 to 5 times between the early 1960s and the early 1980s, the private economy grew 18 times during this period, from being just 3.4% of the national income in 1960 to 20% in 1988. So it actually grew because of revisionism. And you can't deny that.
All right, send the link, please. And
yep, it's called Perestroika: The Complete Collapse of Revisionism by Hapal Bra. It's a very good book.
All right, thanks. I'd like to say that Khrushchev actually abolished all small market and private leftovers from the Stalin era in 1956. The actual abolition took a bit longer than 1956. They were fully abolished in 1960. Here are some articles. Wait 1 second, I'll quote some of them. Despite the war in a number of sectors, market relations have become entrenched. They have already been uprooted by Khrushchev. They interfered with the formalized class of the party farm nomenclature. Khrushchev had fully nationalized the producers' cooperatives. Moshe Levin, The Soviet Century, page 249. On April 14th, 1956, there was a resolution of the Central Committee of the CPSU and the Council of Ministers of the USSR on the reorganization of commercial cooperatives, according to which the RTL enterprises were transferred to the state. This is from the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, controversial party, but still. Okay, here's another article. This is from Yandex. The state of affairs continued until 1956, when Nikita Khrushchev officially banned and within a few years dispersed our consumer cooperatives. Khrushchev decided to completely transfer all RTL enterprises to the state by 1960. The only exceptions were small-scale consumer services, arts and crafts, and handicraft RTLs. Moreover, they were forbidden to carry out regular retail trade in their products. So we see that small markets and private enterprises in general were all abolished by 1956. Although, yeah, as I said, it took a bit longer than that. 4 years.
Why did they grow in the revisionist leadership then?
Because there was a rising black market from 1941.
That's what I've just. There was a rising black market, especially in the revisionist leadership, like the private economy in the Stalin era.
Well, but that's illegal economy for a reason,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
That's illegal. They did not allow this. Whenever this happened, they literally shot the
yeah,
underground factory owners.
yeah,
Even after Stalin,
yeah. I
I
know.
can give you a source.
Yeah,
Why are you mentioning that then?
because the private economy grew, even the legal and illegal one. It was smaller in the 1960s compared to the
The
1980s. Yeah,
legal one,
yeah, and the illegal one grew,
the
especially
legal now.
towards the later
No,
years.
the legal one. No, I give you sources. That's not true. The illegal one did. The illegal one did grew because the Soviet leaders from 1941 onwards were pretty incompetent at handling the black market. However, this is just incompetence. This is not really revisionism. Okay. Anyway, do you want to reply to that, or should we move on to the next economic reform that you talked about?
Uh, let's see, the private economy had actually risen from under 8 million in the early 1960s to 17 to 20 million in the 1970s, and that's an approximately 30 million. That's 12% of the population at the time. It rose to 30 million in 1989. So like the private economy grew under the Gorbachev.
1989. You're talking. Okay, this is
Hang on, what
okay.
I'm saying,
Perestroika was
the the Gorbachev era didn't just come out of nowhere like you're claiming. You know, it happened for a reason.
well. It happened for a reason. However, we this isn't part of the debate. Now, in a nutshell, Andropov gave him high state positions in 1983. That's when relations with Gorbachev started to deteriorate in the last 8 months of Andropov's life, and later uh, and when Andropov was hospitalized, he wrote in his diary that Gorbachev must be purged and should not come to power under any circumstances. And also later, Chernenko had like a very stupid policy that he wanted a stable balance between revisionists, neo-Stalinists, Stalinists, and moderates in the party. This was disastrous and made
Yeah,
Gorbachev powerful. And later,
yeah.
Gorbachev also could the USSR in 1985. You can read articles about that. Romanov, for example, wrote about that.
Can
Okay,
we talk
anyway.
about Gorbachev then, if we've mentioned it?
No, not really, since we are talking about Post-Stalin USSR specifically. But again, private enterprises were not rising under Khrushchev and Brezhnev. They abolished them. However, illegal economy did rise. That's because they were incompetent. And I do agree that leaders can't be perfect. Everyone makes mistakes, and you know I agree with that. But they still try to fight it. They were just incompetent at it. Do you agree with that?
No, I think Khrushchev and Brezhnev were revisionists. Everything they said about working
No, no,
towards
no, no, no,
communism
no.
was
I mean,
written.
I mean, I mean, I'm talking about the private economy and stuff like that.
Yeah, it rose, and mistakes can be made.
Yeah, but they did not support it. They tried to fight it. They were just incompetent at fighting it. The illegal private economy. All right. Anyway, we'll now talk about your other claims. Okay. You said that profit became the main motive to produce. In what economic reform? What is it called?
It was there was a series of liberal reforms, like it took him down the wrong path, the Soviet Union, and
Yeah,
you know you can't
what is
deny
it
that.
called? What is it called?
I
The
I
liberal.
don't actually have the source with me at the moment. So, but what I
I
do
think
know is that the private
Do you
economy
are
did
you talking about Lieberman Kosygin reforms or something?
well, something. It was towards like the 1960s and the 1970s. So, like in between Khrushchev and Brezhnev, that's when reforms
Well, the
started
Khrushchev,
rising as well.
well, Lieberman Kosygin reform started in 1964 under Khrushchev, but
Yeah,
not on a large scale. They started on a large scale under Brezhnev in 1965, and they did not make profit the main motive to produce. If you read Lieberman and Kosygin, you'll see that they actually said that profit should not become the main motive to produce. 1 second, I'll quote them. Wait 1 second. Okay, there you go. All the main. Wait, no, this is on central planning. Oh, okay. We can also talk about central planning later, though. Okay. In our opinion, this should not be about achieving the maximum amount of profit. This is Lieberman talking about his economic reforms in again on planned profit and awards. Further, Kosygin said in Pravda from 1965 in number 271 the following: under the existing practice of material incentives, enterprises are not interested in providing for the most complete use of its internal resources and plans. Since the entire assessment of enterprises' performance and the system of incentives for employees are based on incentives primarily for the fulfillment of the plan. As we can see, the main motive to produce was not profit. They did not want to maximize profit. However, they wanted central planning to become the main motive to produce, which was already the case under Stalin. So this is not revisionism or capitalism. This is socialism. And also, if you want, we can also talk about central planning under Khrushchev and Brezhnev. I can send you the articles on this shit. Uh, Also,
No,
Stalin supported profit.
he was heavily restricted on the Stalin era. I've literally just said, like, have a read of Perestroika, the complete collapse of
No, listen.
revisionism.
The private enterprises, like, although they actually also flourished after like 1930. However, the the thing is that profit. I'm not talking about private enterprise. I'm talking about profit. Profit under Stalin was supported and exaggerated. Let me quote Stalin. 1 second. This will take a while. While I'm looking for a quote, just say whatever you want. It's a quote by Stalin. He supported profit in 1931. He wanted to exaggerate it, and he always did. And from like 1931 to 1953. 1 sec.
Right.
All right, let me quote him now. But that is not all. To it must be added that the fact that owing to inefficient management, the principles of business accounting are grossly violated in a large number of our factories and business organizations. It is a fact that a number of enterprises and business organizations have long ceased to keep proper accounts, to calculate, to draw up sound balance sheets of income and expenditure. It is a fact that in a number of enterprises and business organizations, such concepts as regime of economy, cutting down unproductive expenditure, rationalization of production have long gone out of fashion. Evidently, they assume that the state bank will advance the necessary money anyway. It is a fact that production costs in a number of enterprises have recently begun to increase. They were given the assignment of reducing costs by 10% and more, but instead they are increasing them. Yet, what does a production in the cost of production mean? You know that reducing the cost of production by 1% means an accumulation in industry of 150 million to 200 million rubles. Obviously, to raise the cost of production under such circumstances means to deprive industry and the entire national economy of hundreds of millions of rubles. From all this, it follows that it is no longer possible to rely solely on light industry, on budget accumulations, and on revenue from agriculture. Light industry is a bountiful source of accumulation, and there is a very and there is every prospect of its continuing to expand, but it is not an unlimited source. Agriculture is no less bountiful. Wait, agriculture itself requires financial aid from the state. As for budget accumulations, you know yourself that they cannot and must not be unlimited. What then remains? There remains heavy industry. Consequently, we must see to it that heavy industry and above all its machine building section also provide accumulations. Consequently, while reinforcing expanding the old sources of accumulation, we must see to it that heavy industry and above all machine building also provide accumulations. That is the way out. And what is needed for this? We must put an and to inefficiency, mobilize the internal resources of industry, introduce and reinforce business accounting in all our enterprises, systematically reduce production costs, and increase internal accumulations in every branch of industry without exception. This is the way out. Hence, the task is to introduce and reinforce business accounting to increase accumulation within industry. Essentially, business accounting is khozarashot, and khozarashot basically is profit. So, and he said, quite explicitly, that khozarashot, yeah, so business accounting, should be reinforced in all enterprises and should be um, enforced. So this is by the way, I'll send you the link in a second. So he supported profit. This is from New Conditions, New Tasks in Economic Construction. It's a speech delivered at a conference of business executives on June 23rd, 1931. Here, if you don't believe that business accounting, aka Hodarashot, is, if you don't believe that it's profit, then you can just read this article from Wikipedia on Hodarashot.
Wikipedia, what a great source.
I mean, they sourced, their thing. Their thing.
Yeah, where anybody can edit information on the Wikipedia.
I'm a Wikipedia editor myself. Nobody can edit anything there without citing sources. Otherwise, you'll get
Doesn't
banned
matter.
from Wikipedia.
It still
Why?
doesn't make it a reliable source, man. Wikipedia is
Okay,
the
do you
most
want?
unreliable
Okay,
source out there.
okay. Do you want me then to, quote its sources or something?
From reliable sources, yes, not Wikipedia. Because Wikipedia is also known as Philopedia, really, because anybody can edit it. Doesn't matter what sources you put in there, you're still going to edit the actual information on there. There's no like name of the author or anything, what the author's done. Because when you're looking at sources, you got to look at what the author's done as well, like who wrote the source and everything like that.
All right. Well, anyway, I showed you that. Anyway, I showed you though that the thing, what is it called? That Stone supported Khosrashot. Now I just have to prove you that Khosrashot is profit. 1 second. Okay, the sources that decided is this, the Wikipedia article, and the Great Soviet Encyclopedia. Those are pretty reliable sources to me.
You think
I mean,
Wikipedia is a reliable source?
yeah, because they cite sources, and I just showed you the one of the sources. Plus, I said that they used the Great Soviet Encyclopedia as sources. However, this does not mean that profit was the main motive to produce under Stalin. He supported exaggerating profit and profit. However, the main motive to produce was fulfilling central planning. Do you know what I mean? Profit is just how much wealth an enterprise produces, and
Yeah,
profit can
it's how you get the profit, which is determined really like getting profit from the labor of other people is wrong. But that didn't happen under Stalin, obviously. But it's
no. Listen. You can increase profit via increasing norms and plan targets. That's how you increase profit. That's how an enterprise produces more wealth. That's not really capitalist. It's just basic economics.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is what happened in post-Stalin USSR. I mean, they literally even Lieberman and Kosygin even said that profit is not the main motive to produce. Central planning is. They did not want to maximize profit. How is this capitalism?
They were literally the Khrushchevite revisionists were literally passing on like loads of erroneous market reforms. They came up with this ridiculous idea of market socialism. Like market socialism is not socialism. Market socialism is market.
Dude, I already showed you that he abolished all small market leftovers from the Stone era. And can you please send me a source which says that they came up with market socialism and supported it? Because in fact, they opposed it. They literally criticized Yugoslavia's fucking system for this exact reason. They opposed Yugoslavia and market socialism.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, then
book Perestroika, The Complete Collapse of Revisionism. It talks about Khrushchev and everything as well. It talks about Khrushchev, Brezhnev, what led to
Okay,
the actual demise.
can you cite the exact part where it says that they supported market reforms, because this is
I've got
absolute
this.
bullshit.
I've got the actual preface of the book there for you.
Yeah, but can you like cite, like, can you quote the exact part about markets being supported in post-Stalin USSR, because they abolished it for one, and secondly, market socialism was denounced by the Soviet Union. They opposed Yugoslavia and its economic system. How
Yeah,
can you
the
count
Stalin
this happening?
leadership did.
No, I'm talking
Stalin
about
leadership
the
was
USSR after
okay.
Stalin.
Yeah, they were revisionist. They were.
Dude, okay, but they opposed market socialism. I don't see why you are denying this.
Because it actually happened. If
Because
anything,
they
you're probably denying
implemented
it
it
yourself.
in. Okay,
And
okay.
you know,
I showed you. I showed you that they abolished all small market and leftovers from the Stalin era. I already showed you this fucking picture. I mean, not picture. I've showed you this fucking quotes from those fucking articles, which say that all markets and private enterprises were abolished in 1956. Why are you denying this? Why?
because I've got the evidence from that book, and
It's talking about it's talking about illegal. It's talking about illegal black market. That's illegal. I'm talking about legal enterprises. Those are not
and
legal
that
enterprises.
both of them grew in the revisionist era. Both of them did grow.
Okay, okay. Show me a source. Show me a fucking source that the private and markets, the legal ones, grew. And show me the quote. Show me the quote of your source.
I've got it here now. Let's see.
Okay. Thank you. Can you post it as well?
Let's see. Here we are. If you want, I can read it out for you. It's probably easier doing that.
Okay, sure. Since this is recording, you can read it out as well, since this will be more efficient in the video.
Yeah, I think it would be. This is in the 30 years following the accession of Khrushchev. It says that while the national income and value of retail goods and services in the Soviet Union as a whole increased 4 to 5 times between the early 1960s and the early 1980s, the second economy, which was the private economy, grew 18 times. It was 3.4% of the national income in 1960, and it rose to 20% in 1988. So it grew from Khrushchev to the 80s. This is certainly like is certainly not. It is certainly moving away from socialism. Like the number of people engaged in the illegal part of private economy, it rose from under 8 million to the 1960s to 17 to 20 million in 1974. So it grew. Like I've been telling you this as well. Like approximately 30 million people, that's 12% of the population. It grew to 30 million in 1989 from the 1970s. And if the legal private activity is included, then by the late 1970s, the urban population, which is 62% of the total urban population, earned about 30% of its total income from non-official sources, that is, from either legal or illegal private activity. Like the larger the larger the illegal private economy grew, the more it undermined the legitimate Soviet economy, since the second economy necessarily meant theft of time and material from the state sector, so it could not but result in the much reduced efficiency of the state sector, thus bringing the latter into disrepute into the bargain. So basically, the second economy had a most corrupting influence on the party and state officials. So it ended up bribing them and such activity. Like if it was heavily restricted, like it was under Stalin, then the private economy wouldn't have lasted more than a month, like the illegal parts of it. Because obviously, when the Soviet Union was constructing socialism, before like the 5-year plans and everything, so I'm going way back now, they basically had to build up their productive forces and stuff like that to actually get ready for the building of socialism. But through the economic reforms the Khrushchevites did after Stalin, they created the conditions for the growth of the private economy, which in turn undermined the socialist economy. It bred disbelief in the efficiency of socialism and the effectiveness of planning, and together with the accompanying widespread corruption, destroyed the faith of the Soviet working class in the integrity of the Communist Party itself. Like at the same time, the second economy created a stratum whose interests could not, in the end, be served within the boundaries of socialism. Thus were prepared the conditions for the restoration of capitalism. That's what it says.
All right, thank you. It says that legal private activity grew from the early 1960s to 1988 or 1989. However, yeah, but it doesn't show anything in between the Gorbachev era and anything else. You just go straight from like 1961 to 1988. And by the way, let me tell you something. When the cooperatives reform of 1988 happened, they legalized almost all underground factories. So all of a sudden, the entire black market became legal. So it makes absolutely sense that you know that there was such a big legal private market in 1988 because of the cooperatives reform of 1988, which legalized black market.
Yeah,
But
black market was legal in the 80s.
Huh?
The 80s was the time when the effects of revisionism were out in the open, big time.
Dude, but this is not talking about the actual statistics of private economy in the Khrushchev-Brezhnev era. It just goes straight from the early 1960s and then goes to the cooperatives reform, which legalized the black market in 1988. This is bullshit, dude. I don't know about you, but I think that you should also realize this. And also, when it talks about the late 1970s, it says that 62% of the urban population earned its income, earned 30% of its total income from from non-official sources. So those were not legal sources either. It says from either legal or illegal private activity. Listen, it doesn't say how much was legal specifically. It just says legal or illegal. So this is again bullshit. This is full of shit. Also, I'd like to mention that there were 114,000 private enterprises in 1953 under Stalin. What do you think of that? Just curious what you think of that.
Which year did you say? 1950?
Huh? I'm talking about 1953 when Stalin was alive.
Yeah, towards the end of his life.
Yeah, there were 114,000 private enterprises at that time.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
They were heavily restricted in the Stalin leadership compared to the revisionist leadership. They were.
Okay. Prove that to me, because they literally abolished them, as I said 2 billion times.
Well, by looking at Wikipedia.
What I did not look at Wikipedia to prove that small markets and the like was abolished in 1956. I used various sources such as Yandex, Moshe Levin, iz.ru, and the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. That's not Wikipedia at all. Also, give me please statistics of actual private property growth under Khrushchev and Brezhnev. I am talking about before 1987 and all that bullshit. Like
no.
from the 60s or 70s specifically. And I'm talking about actual legal private activity. Explicitly legal activity, not illegal or illegal. This is bullshit.
I think I did send it to you.
You did send it, but I replied to it. It's full of shit. Do you have any other sources?
Yes, there is also a very good video by the Finnish Bolshevik as well on the Khrushchev coup, and where he talks about
Oh
Stalin's
yeah.
death.
All right. I know about that video. It's literal propaganda. Just so you know, he misquoted an American journalist called Harrison Salisbury. Essentially, Salisbury wrote that he had a fleeting thought in mind that there was a coup going on in 1953. However, that was just a fleeting thought. He didn't say that there was an actual coup going on. He didn't believe that there was such. There is no evidence for that. And also, there were tanks in Moscow, as Harrison Salisbury said, to protect Stalin's body. So this just shows that Khrushchev really cared about Stalin.
By organizing all the arrests and the murders of his closest colleagues. Yeah, that really shows that he cared
Well,
about him.
actually, listen to me. Stalin wanted to purge his colleagues like Mikoyan, Molotov, Beria, and all of that. He wanted to purge them, and that's what Khrushchev did. And also, what is it called? He actually did not purge Mikoyan, although Stalin wanted to, and he actually did not kill Molotov, where Stalin wanted to kill him. And also, what do you think of this quote by Mao? I'm really curious. Wait 1 second. I'll show it to you 1 second. What do you think of this quote by Mao? 1 second. I endorsed the CPSU Central Committee's solution on the Molotov question. That was a struggle of opposites. The facts proved that unity could not be achieved and the two sides were mutually exclusive. The Molotov clique took the opportunity to attack at a time when Comrade Khrushchev was abroad and unprepared. However, even though they wished a surprise attack, our Comrade Khrushchev is no fool. He is a smart person who immediately mobilized his troops and waged a victorious counterattack. That struggle was won between two lines, one erroneous and one relatively correct. In the 4 or 5 years since Stalin's death, the situation has improved considerably in the Soviet Union in the sphere of both domestic and foreign policy. This indicates that the line represented by Comrade Khrushchev is correct and that opposition to his line is incorrect. What do you think of Mao praising 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 Khrushchev's economic policies, domestic policies, and foreign policy as of 1957, and calling Molotov's line incorrect? What do you think of that? I'm just curious.
No, it doesn't really explain why things like the Sino-Soviet split happened and everything.
Well, that happened because Mao wanted to be the sole and only leader of the global socialist movement.
It happened because of revisionism. That was
Yeah,
the
that's
reason for
exact.
it.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. That's why Mao supported the secret speech in 1956. Also, I was being sarcastic. Mao supported the secret speech in 1956. So you're being full of shit. Just look up Stalin's place in history. It's a work by Mao. You can find it on Marxist.org. All right. Anyway, do you want to add anything else?
No, not really. What do you want to say? Do you want to add anything? No.
All right. I'd say then that we need closing statements now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, who started last time? I forgot.
I think it might have been you.
Oh, we were talking about economics. You started, so I start now. Okay. Anyway, okay, guys, that's it for today. We had a pretty good discussion. It's as long as I wanted, around 2 hours. Um, I believe that post-Stalin USSR was not revisionist, as I said. As we saw, Stalinist sources like of Comrade Rhys are full of shit, and they can't accept sources that I have.
Okay, I'll go for my closing statement. Okay, the Khrushchevites created the conditions for widespread corruption. They destroyed the faith of the Soviet working class in the integrity of the Communist Party. At the same time, the private economy grew, and this emerging bourgeoisie couldn't have their interests be served within the current framework of socialism. This was what prepared the conditions for the restoration of capitalism in the USSR. The purpose of a vanguard party, that is a small group of the most class-conscious workers, rather than a gigantic party of managers, the purpose of it is to serve as the ideological guide and leader of the proletariat. This was what the Stalin leadership was striving for, and they achieved it. This makes it clear why it was possible for Khrushchev to rally the bureaucracy behind him and defeat all of the egalitarian democratic efforts to work towards communism. This makes the Trotskyist accusation that Stalin was the leader of the bureaucratic caste ridiculous, as his efforts in 1930 created a party that was even less bureaucratic than Lenin's.
Actually,
This
can I reply to that in like a few minutes?
This destructive activity by the Khrushchevites, it was aimed at destroying socialism and restoring capitalism. At the same time, the revisionist leadership was busy fooling the Soviet masses with boastful and totally false claims that the USSR was marching full steam ahead in the direction of the highest stage of communism. And this all led to the stage of Gorbachev's leadership, where the material and the ideological conditions for capitalist restoration had been sowed, basically. That's my closing statement. So revisionism in the Soviet Union after the Stalin period created the conditions for the restoration of capitalism.
All right, thank you. I'd like to say something now about this. You said that the okay, I'll reply to something else. You said that that the party became full of white collar workers under Khrushchev and Brezhnev, right? Well,
Yes,
let me disappoint you, but actually, 85% of the CPSU consisted out of white collar workers back in 1952. The source that says that that there were a lot of white collar workers is the book called is the Red Flag Flying by Albert Zimansky, and in the same book he said that 85% of the CPSU consisted of white collar workers in 1952 under Stalin. So Khrushchev and Brezhnev actually increased the amount of workers and peasants in the party. There 48% of the party consisted out of workers and peasants in like 1961 under Khrushchev, compared to 54 or 52% in 1976 under Brezhnev. Okay, and also, can you please explain to me how there was a rising bourgeoisie, please? I'm really curious.
it was really the growth of the private economy in the revisionist leadership.
We already talked about that.
Yes, we
Okay,
did.
guys. Okay,
Yeah.
guys, that's enough for today.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Can you end the recording now?
Yeah.
Credits to for Burned or whatever his name is for recording. Thank you. Bye.
There we go.